the elements where to go. Mendeleev, who put them in columns.
Hey there, it's Drew, and I'm back again. Time for another economic topic, which is good since we're in a collapse. And since people love to be trapped in these boxes called socialism or capitalism, I think it's a good idea to bring up an old scientist, the Russian Dmitri Mendeleev, who at the time in the late 19th century was faced with the prospect of how best to develop Russia. So he was brought into the government then on the issue of tariffs. Alright? And he made some very interesting comments too, which is good, because people shouldn't be trapped in any boxes, because as the idiotic debate goes right now, man, we're screwed. So, take it away, Mr. Mendeleev. Enjoy. Please rate and comment and all that good stuff. Alright.
Peter the Great reorganized Russia in order to prepare for its industrial growth and in order to lead it closer to the rest of the world and together with the West. Until the abolition of serfdom and the construction of the railroads, the fundamental idea of the reformer could not be realized on a large scale. Only the Russian eagles rose to meet this idea and made the Colossus of the East one of the most powerful new forces, influencing the destiny of the whole world. Our weapons have been sheathed for a long time, although they are close at hand. But it is clear that strength does not reside in them, but rather in economic production relations. There is a visible glimmer of the dawn of general peace and of a just distribution of the prosperity possible for countries and peoples, then this is strictly thanks to industry, because the experience of history has shown the inadequacy of other means for achieving this. Neither the concentration of military power, nor any particular form of land ownership, nor the very highest development of education. The ancient and even the Middle Ages were strong due to armies and their conquests, but the coming period derives its strength from science and industry and their conquests. The present book is intended within my ability to clarify the relation existing between the development of industry in our country and the tariff. But since the tariff, like any law, is designed not for the past, but for the present time, the degree of the effects of the new tariff on industry belongs to Russia's future. Most of all, it is my desire to show the possibility of a coherent Russian economic life through the development of its industry. This will, however, be in the full understanding that the possibility of finding additional productive work for the people here is more necessary than anything else. In conclusion, I consider it necessary to say that one of the collateral causes for the appearance of this work is the circumstances that in our Russian literature very often, and in the current literature even too often, there are to be found works of the so-called free trade tendency, where it is usually asserted that protectionism is only supported in Russia by people who lack scientific training and for petty, self-serving ends. Belonging to the small circle of Russians who have given their entire lives to science, who own neither factories nor plants, and knowing that contemporary science has uncovered crude untruths and omissions in the classical and orthodox teachings of the free trade school, and finally, seeing that the historical and experimental, that is, the real, path of study of political economy leads to different conclusions than those of the free traders, which are taken on faith as, quote, the last word in science, unquote. I consider it my duty, partly in defense of true contemporary, progressing science, to say openly and loudly that I stand for rational protectionism. Free tradeism as a doctrine is very shaky. The free trade form of activity suits only countries that have already consolidated their manufacturing industry. Protectionism as an absolute doctrine is the same sort of nonsense as free trade absolutism, and the protectionist mode of activity is perfectly appropriate now for Russia, as it was for England in its time. Concerning the classics, Adam Smith and David Ricardo, it is time to cease taking them at their word on everything. It is worth reading them, but in reading them, one ought to see how earnest is their reasoning. And if someone does not see this, then he should not pretend to understand this subject. The doctrine of the free trader may be logical, rational, and beautiful, but that does not make it true. Phlogiston was very logical, rational, and beautiful, but it did not pass the test of experiment and turned into something completely different, to the degree that all chemistry was at one time called anti-phlogiston teaching. Must be understood that the economic doctrines of the nationalists and the historical school have long since broken free tradeism at the roots, and that contemporary economic science should, for clarity, be called anti-free trade. This absolutely must be known by anyone who would speak on economic questions in the name of science.
He was born in Russia in 1834. Hard work as a youth opened up the college doors. He always tried to be the best that he could be, and chose to make his mark in chemistry. And who told the elements where to go? Mendeleev, who put them in columns and in rows. Mendeleev, who was ready, who was able to make a periodic table. Who was that chemist? Mendeleev. He wondered if nature really had a master plan, if the elements had a pattern that one could understand. So he bought a bunch of cards, and on each one wrote the name of an element and its weight, and then he played the game. He put them all in order by their atomic weights. He used their chemical properties to differentiate. Groups began to form, and despite some question marks, he managed to produce a simple periodic chart. Who told the elements where to go? Mendeleev, who put them in columns and in rows. Mendeleev, who was ready, who was able to make a periodic table. Who was that chemist? Mendeleev. At first in 1869 the chart was not a hit, but that young Russian chemist was not the kind to quit. He revised atomic weights and staked his whole career, predicting that several new elements would appear. Oh, a few years passed and sure enough they came. Gallium, scandium, germanium were their names. Chemists everywhere were impressed with what they saw. There really must be something to this periodic law. And who told the elements where to go? Mendeleev, who put them in columns and in rows. Mendeleev, who was ready, who was able to make a periodic table. Who was that chemist? Mendeleev. So they call him the father of the periodic table, and his work gave rise to another kind of label. It's the name for element number 101. In honor of this man they call it Mendelyeev. And who told the elements where to go? Mendeleev, who put them in columns and in rows. Mendeleev, who was ready, who was able to make a periodic table. Who was that chemist? Mendeleev.